Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So not too long ago, I decided to revisit Samurai 8. For those of you who are unaware, Samurai 8 is Naruto creator Masashi Kishimoto's other manga that was released and cancelled within the span of about 10 months back in March of 2020. The very short story is now collected into 5 volumes with a total of 43 chapters. Needless to say, this was quite the flop for Kishimoto, and I do feel for the guy because I really do think he wanted to break free of Naruto's shadow and prove that he could do something else, and I still think he could, but unfortunately Samurai 8 just wasn't it. Anyways, I read Samurai 8 weekly as it was coming out, and for the OGs on the channel, you might remember that I did reviews for it, but I wanted to reread it as a full piece to really see where it went wrong and what redeeming qualities it still has. So I did that, and now here I am, talking to the internet about it. So jumping right into it, I actually really enjoyed the story this time around. I think it definitely came across better and flowed better pacing-wise, being able to read it all together as opposed to waiting a week between chapters, but then again, I think that can probably be said for just about every series. I definitely remember being a lot more bored with the weekly releases though, so for anyone that did read it weekly, I highly recommend going back and reading it in its entirety to really get a feel for what Kishimoto was trying to do. But anyways, the first thing I think I should touch on in regards to Samurai 8 is its setting. This was Kishimoto's attempt at creating a sci-fi manga, which is something that he said that he always wanted to do, and partly why I think that Boruto has been leaning in that direction with the cyborgs and the scientific ninja tools and whatnot. What he's done here in Samurai 8 is taken feudal Japan era samurai and put them in a more futuristic sci-fi setting with technology and spaceships and all that good stuff. It's basically the concept behind Star Wars, but I'll get into that in a minute. I think one of the overlooked aspects of Kishimoto's work is his ability to blend the ancient with the future. Naruto was a great example of this, where a lot of the architecture and way of life was very feudal Japan-esque, yet they did have monitors and electricity and other technology that made the universe seem very unique in terms of its setting. It's almost like a look into a world that simply developed different from our own. And I think with Samurai 8, Kishimoto was able to deliver on that once again. The blend of high-tech sci-fi aspects and ancient samurai was done very well in my opinion. They still had dojos and swords and a traditional way of doing things, yet the world still felt like it was set far in the future. I personally would have preferred a more gritty cyberpunk-like take on this concept, but I don't think that's the vibe Kishimoto was going for, so I can't really deduct points for that. Now, as far as the power system in this universe goes, I think it definitely could have used some work to make the combat a little more entertaining. All of the fights themselves were actually really short and usually only consisting of a few attacks before somebody lost, so it definitely didn't have the same caliber of fights that Kishimoto was able to achieve in Naruto, so it was a little lackluster in that area. But my main issue was with the power system itself because it had a lot of potential, but it suffered from being overly vague about everything. I won't go into too much detail as this isn't meant to be an explanation video, but basically samurai are created through these locker balls. A person commits seppuku in front of a locker ball, and if they are worthy enough, they will, instead of just dying, be transformed into a samurai, giving them a cybernetic body and a samurai soul. With this new body, samurai are able to control matter and gravity, which allows them to perform their basic abilities. They can sense the gravity of other people, which is basically like sensing power levels in Dragon Ball. They regenerate their limbs and their body parts, and the thing that I really didn't like was that they become immortal. That's right. Every samurai character in the series is immortal. Doesn't matter how fatal the injury, they will just regenerate like Orochimaru times 10. The only way a samurai can die is if they lose the will to fight and accept defeat. A samurai dies only if they abandon their calling as a samurai. In this case, the warrior god will forsake them and they will revert back into a locker ball state. Now this could be cool if you look at it from the perspective that it will take more than just beating someone to kill them. You have to convince them to give up, like you're Naruto or something, which could make things more interesting, but for me, I found that this just significantly lessened the stakes in every situation. It's a shonen manga, so you know that the main character is never going to give up or accept defeat, so he'll never die. The only times the stakes really felt high was when the lives of living mortals were at stake, which wasn't a lot, unless you count the enemy's overall goal to destroy and rebuild the galaxy from scratch. That being said, they did introduce an ability in the later chapters that allowed a samurai to cut another, and it didn't allow regeneration, but even still, they couldn't die. Other than that, the samurai have their samurai soul blade and their holder, which is basically a pet that can turn into armor or be used as ships or mech suits or whatever. The samurai soul blade was a powerful energy blade that can cut through a large majority of things. This blade would change color based on the purity of the samurai's soul. Hachimaru, the main character, of course, had a pure white blade, but some of the villains were noted to have blades that were cloudy. It wasn't very clear on what that meant combat-wise, so I'm assuming nothing. Anyways, the vague part of this power system was really just not explaining how all of the abilities worked or what the limits were. It vaguely touched on something called H-particles, which was sort of like the power source of their abilities, and by changing the density of them, they were able to perform different things. They also had different stats: strength, speed, intelligence, technical sense, gravity, key holder, heroism, and charisma. And based on these stats, you were able to perform specific abilities depending on the ability's requirements. This was also kind of vague because while things like speed and strength are pretty self-explanatory, things like heroism and charisma seem like weird requirements to perform an ability. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but for the sake of not dwelling on it for too long, basically there was sort of too much information, but at the same time not enough, or rather, there was a lot of moving parts to the power system introduced, but never a clear connection between everything or a set of rules that was established. And I took issue with this because it's a lot easier to impress us as an audience if we are aware of how a power system works and what its limits are. That way we know when the limits are being pushed, what is to be expected, and what is beyond what is expected. It just felt like because of the unclear power system, I wasn't able to fully grasp the gravity of what was going on in a fight. No pun intended. If one dude's attack was bigger than the other guy's, we just had to assume that it was stronger without any real exposition on the matter. Maybe with more time, the series would have been able to better flesh out the system and the rules of this universe, but from what we got, it just seemed like Kishimoto was introducing too many things and not quite connecting it all clearly enough. Before we move on to some of the bigger topics, I just want to quickly touch on the artwork. I think Samurai 8 has really great artwork and character design. I believe that the artist Akira Okubo has the closest to Kishimoto's art style you can get without being Kishimoto. I would say that the artwork and paneling in Samurai 8 is actually much better than it is in Boruto with Ikimoto doing the art. I think Ikimoto is doing a fine job, but Okubo definitely nailed the Kishimoto look, and the way he panels the action scenes are so fluent and easy to read. It looks really good. If they are ever working on a new Naruto project after Boruto, I definitely think they should give Okubo a call. The only issue I have with Samurai 8's art, and it is a minor one, but I feel like it could use a lot more shading. A lot of the art is kind of just left white, leaving things to feel less dynamic at times, but man, when there is shading, look how nice this looks. It's so clean. Needless to say, I don't think the artwork had anything to do with Samurai 8's cancellation. Okay, let's talk plot and characters. So Samurai 8 follows a boy named Hachimaru who dreams of becoming a samurai. At the beginning of the series, he is sick and weak and he cannot leave his home due to the life support machine that he must remain connected to. That is until he meets his soon-to-be samurai master Daruma, and his father is held hostage by a ronin. Long story short, in order to save his father's life, he commits seppuku near a locker ball and becomes a samurai. Daruma then takes him off-world on a quest to find the remaining samurai keys, who are samurai that together can open artifacts known as Pandora's Box and Mandala's Box in order to save the galaxy from certain destruction. I won't go into all of the details, but that's the gist of it. What I mentioned earlier about Samurai 8 basically being the same concept as Star Wars is this. So you have this ancient order of warriors that protect the galaxy, the samurai or the Jedi. You then have the main character who lives on this backwater planet and is secretly being hidden away from the villains, Hachimaru or Luke Skywalker. You then have the master that comes to get him one day to teach him the ways of the samurai/Jedi in order to bring him on a quest to save the universe, Daruma or Obi-Wan. But Hachimaru/Luke Skywalker is not Daruma/Obi-Wan's first apprentice. No, he had an apprentice that betrayed the good guys long ago and is now on the side of the evil samurai/Sith. Enter Atta or Darth Vader. The true villain and mastermind, however, is Atta/Darth Vader's new master, Kala/Emperor Palpatine. The reason they want to capture Hachimaru/Luke is to convince him to join them because of the latent power within him. Now, someone is known to be a samurai/Jedi because of how strong their gravity is or how strong they are in the Force. When a child has strong Force or gravity, they are sometimes taken away to become samurai or Jedi. Samurai have samurai soul blades and Jedi have lightsabers, both a type of energy blade. I could also compare Samurai 8's H-particles to Star Wars midichlorians, as they are both said to connect all life, but I think you get the point. There are a lot of parallels between the two, which as a Star Wars fan I found interesting. But anyways, getting back on track, I think the overall concept for the plot is fine. Hachimaru finds out that he was actually a byproduct of an experiment done by the man he thought was his father while he was working for the series villains. This experiment was to create artificial samurai keys to unlock the artifacts. So essentially Hachimaru must find the real key samurai while trying to not get captured by the enemy samurai who need him to unlock the boxes. There was definitely enough plot twists and interesting story elements to keep me entertained. I think the only area that I felt was kind of lacking in my read-through was that things just felt a little too fast at times. And I don't just mean at the end because it was cancelled and they had to rush out an ending. Like, even in the beginning, it felt like things were moving a little too fast, where it might have benefited from really exploring the concepts it was introducing and having the little arcs be longer. There was one portion in particular that pissed me off where Kishimoto had set up a tournament arc as this big battle royale on an abandoned planet, but they just kind of montaged the whole thing and jumped right to the end where the villain was revealed to have set up the tournament to steal samurai keys. So this would be like if they just montaged the entire Forest of Death and tournament fights in Naruto's Chunin exams and jumped right into Orochimaru's assault. A lot of the story felt like Kishimoto was desperately trying to get things going as fast as possible to grab people's attention, but it ended up having the opposite effect for me. I think overall, a more fleshed out and detailed story would have been far more engaging to me. The fights were far too short, and the one villain they introduced outside of the main villains was very short-lived. It always felt like they were moving on to the next plotline before really utilizing the current one as much as they could. But enough of that, let me tell you what really made Samurai 8 worth the read for me. The characters. If this manga did anything right, it was its characterization. Each and every character felt so unique with their own personality quirks and semi-fleshed out stories, at least in the time that Kishimoto had to try to flesh them out. And the ones that weren't fleshed out were definitely brimming with potential to be had the story been able to continue. I don't really know how to articulate the way the cast made me feel, but it was very reminiscent to Naruto's Konoha 11 or 12 in that I could easily see any one of the characters being somebody's favorite. Nobody felt flat or uninteresting. Kishimoto's character writing was on point in Samurai 8, and you could tell that he had a lot planned for them. The main character, Hachimaru, was inspiring in a similar way to Naruto, but their personalities definitely felt different. He wasn't as loud and in your face as Naruto, and he questioned himself a lot, where Naruto was oftentimes blindly confident. Hachimaru had a lot of issues to overcome with how he perceived himself and what it means to be a samurai. I found that he was a main character I could really get behind and believe in as a hero, but at the same time felt really relatable to me. Especially because at first he was just a gamer who was stuck in his house, and when he was in real life battles he was constantly calling back on his gaming knowledge to aid him, which I thought was a really amazing trait for him. Honestly, I think I like Hachimaru better than Boruto as a main character, but you didn't hear me say that. I obviously can't sit here and talk about every single character in the series, but I want to give an example of my favorite instance of character writing from Samurai 8, just to really drive home the point that Kishimoto was really in his bag with these characters. My favorite character in the series was named Nanashi, which means nameless. In the world of Samurai 8, Nanashi is a nickname for orphans who have no place in the world. When Hachimaru first meets Nanashi, he was afraid to leave his house. Much like Hachimaru, he hadn't been outside in years, and he was metaphorically invisible to everyone. He was a nobody. His only friends were actually his hands, which he spoke to and called Mr. Right and Miss Left. Hachimaru, as any good main character would, convinces him to leave his home and live his life. Hachimaru inspires Nanashi to take action, and he says to him, "If you do not draw your blade from its sheath, you will never know how fine it can cut. Nanashi then vows to meet Hachimaru again one day, but this time as a samurai. Hachimaru leaves and we don't see Nanashi again till the end of the series, in which he actually comes to Hachimaru's rescue, just like Hachimaru did for him so long ago. Mr. Right and Miss Left become voices in his holder, and the most beautifully symbolic part of all of it was that Nanashi, as a samurai, gained the ability to traverse in an incarnate body that is like a projection of yourself, undetectable by other samurai. The irony being that him being invisible to those around him was his greatest weakness and insecurity in the beginning of the series, but it's that very same concept that ends up being his greatest strength in the end. His name was also still Nanashi, but instead of meaning nameless, it was written with the characters that mean 7 desires, which I won't get into but actually ties back to the reason that Hachimaru's Princess Anne's late brother called himself Nanashi. So everything was interconnected and symbolic like that, and it was very reminiscent to how Kishimoto always did things like that in Naruto. Nanashi saving Hachimaru was also amazingly symbolic, not only because Hachimaru saved him, but also because in the end of the story, Hachimaru was hooked up to this machine and couldn't move, just like how he started the story on his life support. And it really moved me when Nanashi looks Hachimaru in the eyes, for the first time showing his face that's usually hidden behind his hair, signifying that he wasn't the scared boy he once was, and he says to the defeated and hopeless Hachimaru, "I thought you said you were sick of being cooped up inside." Hachimaru still then expresses his hopelessness, saying that the man he must defeat is someone that his master couldn't even defeat, and that he is trapped in this place. To which Nanashi cuts him off and replies, "If you do not draw your blade from its sheath, you will never know how fine it can cut." Hachimaru's words from the beginning of the series. This brings Nanashi's character and his relationship with Hachimaru full circle, and I just can't get over how beautiful it was. Before I wrap this up, I just want to say that Kishimoto was actually well on his way to writing one of the best female characters he ever has as well, with Hachimaru's Princess Anne. She was a great character on her own, not just as an accessory to Hachimaru, and the love story developing between her and Hachimaru was so much more natural feeling and interesting than the relationships he developed in Naruto. So it sucks that we didn't get to see that play out fully. Anyways, I suppose I've rambled on long enough. I just don't plan on making any more Samurai 8 videos after this, so I wanted to make sure that I really spoke about everything I wanted to before I put this manga on my shelf to collect dust forever. In conclusion, Samurai 8 had some flaws when it came to its power system and the explanations for things in the universe, which made it difficult for me to really get as immersed as I would have liked to be. But I think that the story had some really well thought out plot points, symbolism, and character writing that would have been so amazing had the series gotten to be as long as Kishimoto wanted it to be. I think the best way to say it is that Samurai 8 had a lot of potential, but it unfortunately just didn't grab people's attention enough to keep it from getting the axe, which is really a shame because I think that Samurai 8 would have been a massive hit in the market like 10 years ago. I find that Kishimoto's writing needs a longer amount of time to really see the impact and how everything relates. And I feel like the current state of shonen and the current audiences just didn't allow for that this time. It's sad, but it is what it is. At any rate, I highly recommend you go check out Samurai 8 if you haven't, even though if you watch this video, some things are now spoiled for you, but it's definitely worth the short read. And like I said, if you read Samurai 8 weekly, I recommend going back to revisit it like I did. It's definitely a better experience the second time around, in my opinion. Oh, I guess I should probably answer the question I asked in the title. Did Samurai 8 deserve to be cancelled? No, I don't think so. From a business standpoint, yeah, if it wasn't profitable, but from an artistic standpoint, I think that the series had a lot it could have offered if less people had slandered it and more people had just not listened and gave it a chance to really get going. Would it have been as good as Naruto? No, probably not, but I definitely could have seen it developing a large fan base, just like Boruto, Black Clover, and some of the other largely hated on shonen were able to do. Anyways, that's going to be all. This video is probably way too long for a 5-volume manga, but f*** it, we out here. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought of Samurai 8. Subscribe if you're new to the channel for more Boruto, Naruto, and other anime and manga content, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.